Hello and welcome in. It's another edition of Where the 99 Leads. I'm Andrew Joyce, your host, and today's program we'll talk about the library, the Alera Library at the University of Pikeville. Of course, Where the 99 Leads talks about the history of the University of Pikeville and those historic 99 steps that lead to campus, but also lead from campus back into the world. One step at a time, into the community, into the county, into the state, into our country, and beyond. And joined today by Edna Fugit, archivist and reference librarian at the University of Pikeville. So good to have you here once again.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm a history buff, and you're one of those people on campus that has hands-on history. Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about.
Right.
At the as an archivist at the University of Pikeville. We're going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about your background, where you come from, and how you arrived at the University of Pikeville.
Well, I am a graduate of the College of Pikeville College. I am from the Belfry area, from Hardy, Kentucky, and I attended school here a while ago.
A few years
ago. And then I went off for a while and ended up with my library degree from UK and came back here to start as a librarian and fell into archives, which was a good call.
And of course, the archives at the University of Pikeville, many are in dusty old rooms, in boxes, part of which is on display. Mm-hmm. But so much of the archives is not.
Right.
It's still a work in progress.
Sure.
And that's the case with many different archives. I've been to Washington, D.C. I've been to the National Archives, and we get to see a sampling of what they have there, but nowhere near what is being preserved and stored and taken care of. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the process as well.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that today. The Alera Library hosts a collection of interesting items, archive materials. When I think of archives, I think of old photos, old documents, newspaper clippings, those type of things. And of course, the Alera Library has those. What types of items are in the university's collections?
Well, we try to keep a wide range of things. So, as you said, photos, newspaper clippings, documents, those types of things, those are necessary for any archives, any special collections. But in addition to that, we keep what's called ephemera. Ephemera are the objects. Those are the things that encapsulate history. So we have coal miner helmets, because it's not just college. So you will have jerseys from the baseball team and the basketball team. You'll have the coal miner helmets. We might have, I know we do, we have what's called a shoe last, which is a large iron stand on which you can form shoes, which was a common thing before we had Walmart and could go get something.
Right.
We have, my goodness, what else do we have? We have various posters that have been kept, and we just keep hold of those. We have straw hats, if they were important to it sounds odd, but
right.
Phonathons use straw hats at a time, so we'll keep the straw hats. We have film. We have VHS tapes. We have DVD. We have old 35 millimeter reel film. We have anything that pertains to the area and to the college altogether. Anything that applies to that, we try to keep it if it has a snapshot of Appalachian life in it.
And not just those older types. By the way,
No.
35, 8 millimeter, kids, ask your parents or ask your grandparents what those are, because those are older types of media that held information. Mm-hmm. But you also have ways to display those.
Yeah. A lot of things, the 35 millimeter, we have to send that sort of thing out. But say our collections of slides, which was PowerPoint before we had PowerPoint.
Sure.
We have thousands and thousands of slides, and we work to digitize those and make those available. Part of our collections that are online in the digital library came from those slides. So things that we can't typically access, we work hard to make them accessible.
And you talk about digitalizing those. That's a never-ending process.
Oh my gosh. It is a long range. When you scan a photo, you're looking at just scanning time at least 5 to 7 minutes to scan it. The same goes for one slide.
Wow.
So if you have, as I said, we have thousands of slides, it is, I will be retired and we still wouldn't have everything
Absolutely.
digitized.
And you would need a huge staff to be able to do that. So much technology out there, but so much needed as well,
Right.
because there are so many important things that we need to preserve and we need to have for the next generation and the next generation and beyond. I know also much of the archives of our local newspapers have been saved on microfiche,
Yes, we have
and
those.
you have those as well. And it's something that if someone's looking to look back in history at old newspapers, that's where they go.
Yes. It is a long and slow process, though, because you can't just search by word on those. You have to
Right.
go reel by reel and picture by picture.
Right. And I don't think that the current generation understands that this is not Google.
No.
This is a much more detailed search, and you have to be able to search for date and time and narrow it down to a certain weekend time, and be able to find those articles. But it's an important part of our history,
Yes.
and it is there. How important is and what purpose do archives serve?
Our archives is in our library, and much like a library, the main goal of an archives is access. We go about it differently. I mean, our access has to come with a preservation that you don't typically have in a library. The things that we get tend to be one of a kind or extremely rare, and so you go in with a mind of preserving things as long as you can. Nothing lasts forever,
Sure.
but you do what you can to extend its life. And in extending its life, you make it accessible to other people. So the goal of our archives and the goal of any archives is to make sure that the people that want the information can get the information. And that is what I'm trying to do with what we
Absolutely.
have.
Of course, history. The University of Pikeville just celebrating 125th anniversary. It sparked an interest in the university's history, looking back all the way to the beginning, or as far as close to the beginning as we could. How are you continuing to share UPike's history?
Well, the 125, that was a really exciting time. I got to do all kinds of fun stuff with that. But now we're on Facebook. So whenever I can, it's just me. So anytime that I have a free moment to post things, I like
Right.
to add things to Facebook.
Sure.
But of course, we also were able to start the digital library, and our digital library on the archive section of it, it's not just here are a group of pictures, it includes history. So the section on the Collegiate Institute will have a history of it and all of the images that I've been able to upload. We also work with freshman studies classes now to incorporate University of Pikeville history so that they now know the school that they're coming into. And we now also do alumni newsletter articles, so all the alumni hopefully get emails that include a history article with all of their information.
Very good. And maybe learning something they never knew while they were a student there.
I hope so.
Yeah. The history of the University of Pikeville, it's rich and detailed, and you can be a part of that as well through the Alara Library. There are countless stories to tell from the University of Pikeville. You talk about when you get a chance, able to share those on social media,
Yeah.
and some history along with a snapshot of the University of Pikeville. And we talk about the lasting impact of those that have been special to the university. And one of the favorites of many is Mary Spillman.
Yes, she's one of my favorite too.
Let's hear some stories.
I never got to meet her, but in this case, I spend so much time with her stuff, it doesn't matter. Mary Spillman came in 1918, and she died here doing college work in 1971.
Wow.
She was 30 when she came in 1918. She is responsible pretty much for starting the yearbook that we have. She did theatrical productions with the students. She came just to teach math. James Record, one of our early presidents, and his daughter Alice convinced her to come.
Right.
And she taught math, but then she just dove into the student life. The students didn't have a whole lot to do at the time, you know, early 20th century around here, it wasn't too exciting. And so she made things for them. She learned to play piano and learned to sing so that she could have activities with the students.
Wow.
She threw parties, she did all these wonderful things. She would play jump rope and races with them. She was the first women's basketball coach. That's what she did her first year. So she did all kinds of really exciting things. And in addition to teaching math, she later taught Bible. She taught 1 or 2 foreign languages, and she taught There was another one besides that. Most people know her for biology, though. That was what she came, and she did a lot with plant life. She was incorporated in the News Express. She did news articles. She's one of 2 people that we have that has a building that was named after her while she was alive.
Right.
And the city named the street in front of it Spillman Lane in her honor. She was an educator that all of our teachers should hope to emulate. She was amazing.
Quite possibly spent more time on campus.
She did. Well, she taught until 1959. She was in her 70s. And then she was done, couldn't teach anymore, and so she just took up alumni affairs at that point.
Right.
And so she just kept going.
Yeah. Still on campus.
Yeah.
Spent more time on campus than anyone in history,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
She also kept photo albums and scrapbooks relating to the university and its students, and of course then donated those then to the university and to the institution. What are some of the most interesting pieces you found?
She was a big scrapbooker. She gave us more than just her scrapbooks, and there's some wonderful things. But in relation to those, our early yearbooks from 1924 through about 28, you can turn pages, and in most cases, they just copied her scrapbook pages.
Wow.
And so we have the original scrapbooks that the yearbooks were based on. So we have these images of all the students and their plays and all of the things that they worked. And so those are great on the college level. And she also has this set of 3 World War II scrapbooks, which are of alumni of the school. She sent out alumni newsletters to all of these people that were at war, men and women, and they would send her cards, postcards, and photos. So we have photos of the Eagle's Nest, where Hitler had his main base. There were people that came shortly after everything was taken down, and they took images and sent them to her. She has battle scenes, places all over from South America, North America, all of Europe and Asia. She has images of war and peacetime all over. They're really amazing, amazing images.
And of course relating to the university through its students.
Exactly.
And that's what this program's all about, Where the
Right.
99 Leads, of course, leading to campus, but leading from campus into the community and into the world. Edna Fugit, our guest today, archivist and reference librarian at the University of Pikeville, as we talk about Mary Spillman, obvious love for Pikeville.
Yes, it was
And
amazing.
Mary Spillman came from where?
She came from Illinois. She went to school in Illinois. She went to school with Alice Record, which was James Record's daughter.
Right.
And Alice came back. She spent some time in Center College, and then she came back, and she was here for quite a few years, teaching and doing administration. But she just met up with Alice, and then Alice told James Record, and she was great.
Yeah, and fell in love with Pikeville, the
She did.
community and the college,
Yeah.
as many people do. Many people come to Pikeville and never leave.
Yeah.
And I don't think they understand the draw, and I'm not sure those of us that are here understand the draw. But there's something that keeps us here. The story of the Webbers is a colorful one that spans the globe as well. Beginning in Russia, they also lived and taught in China and Brazil before coming to Kentucky. Tell us that story.
Well, it's one of those things where I stumbled upon it, and it amazes me every time that I see it. There was no real information on the Webbers. We have a Weber art gallery,
Right.
so I knew she taught here.
Sure.
But then after I was digging around in some separate collection materials not related to the college, I found a newspaper article that was published quite a few decades ago that laid out how Marguerite Weber and her husband Arkady, they had lived in Russia during the time that the Bolsheviks had taken over, and both of them had connections with Tsarist Russia. Marguerite's mother was a governess for one of the dukes, the Grand Duke Constantine, that was his name. And then she moved on and taught at an institute. And so Marguerite had went to the institute, but the institute had been set up by Tsarist Russia. It had been set up in the 1700s. And so that had been taken over when Lenin took power. And so she had to flee. And then separately, her husband, who was born of a German musician and a Tartar countess, he had ended up serving in the military for Tsarist Russia and then became what was called a White Russian. They fought the Bolsheviks. And he had to flee and went to China. They both went to China in 2 separate ways at 2 separate times, and they met there. And in 1928, they married and lived there for about 20 years until World War II set in,
Right.
which is a time where China, after the war, China got into civil war, and Communist China arose, and they knew that they couldn't stay there after they had left Russia, so they fled Communist China, and they ended up in Rio de Janeiro for 2 years. I'm not sure why, but after the end of 2 years, they left and they came to Pikeville. And they ended up American citizens as of 1954, and she taught here for about 16 years, and her husband closer to 10. I can't remember for sure, but I know he was here for quite a while. And they loved the area. They never visited Russia again. They had really hard time with it. But yeah, they spent many years here.
Any idea how they got from Rio de Janeiro to Pikeville?
It's not really clear. I find it
I'm sure it's
fascinating
not.
that you go from Rio de Janeiro to Pikeville, Kentucky, but they apparently never regretted it. They really loved it here. They enjoyed it and spent many years here.
Russia, China, Rio de Janeiro to Pikeville. Sounds
Yes.
like witness protection gone bad.
Almost, yeah.
It really does. It's an interesting story. And of course, they arrived here and they were a great addition to the Pikeville and to the college community. Those are just a couple of examples of special stories. What are you working on now?
Well, each month we put out new alumni newsletter articles. And so I'm kind of shuffling my way because I'm working on finally uploading the last section of the World War II scrapbooks to our digital library because we already have 2 of them up and I'm working on the 3rd one. And then also I'm working on information about it's not entirely about one of our former presidents. His name was Thomas Johns. He served 68 to 69. It was a very short term,
Right.
but it was a very frustrating term. He ended up having to testify to the Kentucky Un-American Activities Committee because this was during issues communism. This seems to be the theme of this episode. They said that he was a communist, and it led to a division in our newspaper. We ended up with an underground newspaper for a while.
Wow.
There were fights among students. There were fights with the faculty. We actually ended up with a magazine article in Time magazine in November of 1969 over the whole thing. And so it was just this fascinating little section of our history that we need to flesh out some.
Absolutely. And that's a story I've never heard.
Yeah, most people haven't.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you tell it.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to see these collections, and it makes me want to go to the library as soon as we wrap up this show and do some reading because there are stories I've never heard, and I thought I'd heard all the stories. Here in Appalachia, we've got a rich history. Of course, so much genealogy that goes on with that, families that go back decades, that go back generations here in our area. Tell us about how folks can gather that information. They can access that information that you may have when they're doing their genealogical studies.
We keep what's called a finding aid. So it has a list of the information that we supply. For some of our collections, you can find it by accessing the library webpage. There will be links that will take you there. But we have a lot of print material. We keep genealogy books. Many of them are one of a kind or very limited print, so you're not going to find them very much.
Sure.
We also have what are called surname files from a few genealogists in the area. We have the material from the Pike County Historical Society and from Mr. Henry Scaff, who was a genealogist from Floyd County. So we have a substantial amount of random surname information that didn't necessarily make it in a book, but it's very valuable. And of course, we carry the newspaper. And we have a really interesting thing is the Old Regular Baptist Associational minutes,
Right.
because they keep obituaries,
Sure.
and they're usually very fascinating. And a lot of people can find their family in the area by running through those obituaries if they know the time. So in most cases, as long as they set an appointment with me, they're more than welcome to come up. They can let me know what information they're searching for, and I can pull to make it easier on them.
Yeah, Edna Fugit, archivist and reference librarian at the University of Pikeville, our guest on this edition of Where the 99 Leads. We talk about genealogy, we talk about history, and I think it's fascinating that you have the old regular minutes because they're very detailed and offer a lot of information, and those, of course, are a part of our history. As many folks in our area study their genealogy. These are things you can't find on Ancestry.com. Only at the Alera Library. And I think it's very interesting, and it's something that obviously many people would want to be a part of. The Alera Library also accepts donations. You
Yes.
mentioned Henry Scaff. I know a large collection. The Henry Scaff collection I've heard referenced many, many times.
Yeah.
So much information there. What types of archives are you interested in, and what types do you accept?
I am interested, and the school is interested, in anything that pertains to Central Appalachia. It doesn't have to be Pike County. It can be Floyd, Martin. It can be Mingo, West Virginia.
Sure.
Areas of Virginia and Tennessee. As long as it hits that general area, it shares the same cultural history.
Right.
Obviously, school, our institute, we want information about them, but it's not just that. We take genealogy, we take history, whatever reflects that Appalachian history and culture. We want to keep it. We want to preserve it. We have facilities to do it, and we also work on digitization. So it's not that it will always be locked up. We are always constantly attempting to make it more and more accessible.
What goes into the archiving process?
Oh, it can be detailed, so
Yes.
let's leave it at the main point is to make sure that you have temperature control, you have humidity control, you have lighting control. You have to make sure that you process, because you can't just throw a box on a shelf and
Right.
think that you're going to know what's there.
Sure.
So you have to make sure that you catalog and process that information, and then keep it safe, because if you keep it in a hot lit room, it's pointless.
Right.
So we try to make sure that the temperature stays balanced and that material can stay good as long as it possibly can.
And how large is the staff?
Me. Right now, as far as archive goes, we have work study. We have a group of students that I trust and can help me with the digitization process. And we have the library staff who will help me when necessary. But as of right now, I am the one that makes sure everything gets processed. We
Right.
have 3 rooms of archives and 1 of special collection now, which has grown. It was only 1 archive room when I started
Right.
2 years ago, and now it's up to 3. So we're growing, and it seems to be working.
Right. And these are packed full.
Yeah. One of them still has room for those donations that we would love to have
Right.
come in.
Right. Where does it go from here?
So many places. We want to make it so that more people can access it, not just a researcher. So we work with the digitization, but not just that. We want to increase our displays. We want to increase access in as many ways as possible, and not just as a general access. We want to make sure that we can preserve as much as possible. So the more that we can get in, the more that we can catalog and gather as information, the more that the community at large can use. So I really don't like to set a ceiling. I like it just to keep going as much as it can and see.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a gymnasium on the lower campus that is large enough possibly to be a good start.
That would be perfect.
Yeah.
Something about that size.
Something about
Temperature
that.
controlled, but
about
something
that
about
size.
that size.
Temperature control. I mentioned earlier, I've been to the National Archives.
Yes.
And I understand somewhat what you're talking about as far as temperature controlled and lighting controlled, because the documents that they have there
Yes.
that are on public display are under a special type of light and under glass and sealed, and we understand that. And we have those same type of documents that are just important to our community as what those are to our country. And you're acting to preserve those and keep those so that future generations can also see those documents and those things. It's a wonderful part of the University of Pikeville Alera Library. If someone is tuned in and they're interested in learning more about the archives, some of the collections that you have, perhaps they're doing some genealogy work, perhaps they're doing some type of research about history of our region. How can they find out more?
The easiest way is to check the library website. If you go to upike.edu, there is a library services page. If you click on that, then you will find special collections. It will come up along with the library material. That would be the easiest way to get the information. You can also call the library at 606-218-5625, and you can talk to me that way. But my email and all the other contact information is online, so that would be the easiest way to get it.
If someone wants to make a donation, they have a large collection of pictures, of documents from history throughout our region, and they'd like to donate those to the the collection at UPike, they could do that as well.
Yes, they can link it there, large or small. Over the last little bit, I've gotten about 10 new collections, and some of them have been quite large,
Right.
dozens and dozens of large-scale maps, to ones that are just 2 or 3 boxes, to a folder.
Sure.
All of those are good collections, and all of them have valuable material. But just contact me. We have donor forms to make sure that everything is good and that your stuff will be taken care of, and you know it will.
Sure.
And we would be happy.
These can be donations, long-term,
Yeah.
permanent, or they can also be on loan to the Alera.
Sometimes we try to avoid the loan unless it's certain things. We've had experiences in the past where loans have went sideways. So we prefer for them to be a permanent donation,
Right.
but we do make them publicly accessible, so it's not that big of a deal. If you do have images, however, we are open to the digitization, and then we can keep the digital copy and you can keep your original.
Right.
So if there's something that you would like to have preserved, but you want to hold on to it a little longer, then you can contact me and we can talk about that.
And then we've talked about it before, the Hatfield-McCoy feud. It's been brought back to the public in recent years with the documentary, with those things, and of course with the mini-series, and a renewed interest in that feud, and of course part of that feud taking place right on the University of Pikeville campus, with the hanging site being there, the historical marker. You've seen an uptick in
Yeah.
folks that are interested in the Hatfield-McCoy feud. What type of items do you have? What are people looking for when they come there?
Most of the time, we get a great deal of genealogy. It often comes back to genealogy, especially with the Hatfield-McCoy. Everyone wants to be related to either Hatfields or McCoys.
Right.
Depending on who it is, we got a preference. But we have a lot of books with historical material, and they'll access those. But a great deal of it comes from the genealogy records. Very little more is requested than those genealogy records that we have.
And what is your favorite item?
Oh, my goodness.
Is that like asking a parent their favorite child?
Possibly. Sometimes you just take them out and you catalog and you review everything that you have, and so it can be amazing. But probably I would say some of my very favorite would be the Mary Spillman scrapbooks. Those
Yes.
to me they encapsulate life, they encapsulate Appalachian, they encapsulate Pikeville College,
Right.
and for me, just going through those, that's probably my very favorite thing.
When was the last wow moment you had?
Probably when just before I went on vacation and I pulled out a medallion that was for aviator. His name was Mr. Riddle, and it was a medallion that was given to him from the Aviation Museum, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just amazing that it just shone out. It was like, look at this, because it's just another example of alumni from the school and what they
Right.
can do.
And if I'm not mistaken, he was the pilot who actually flew underneath
He did.
the middle bridge.
He
And
sure enough did.
kids, even some of you olders, ask your parents and grandparents about the upper, lower, and middle bridge. But there's a historical marker there.
Yes, and he went on to form the Riddle Aviation Academy, which, if I'm not mistaken, became U.S. Airways. I
Right.
may be wrong, but it later became U.S. Airways. So
Very, very famous pilot from our area. Edna, always our pleasure. I'm a history buff, and I really could come just hang out and just flip through the collections for hours upon hours. And maybe I'll drop my cable and I'll just do that.
Yes,
And just flip
you
through
should.
the collections of history that are available at the Alera Library. But thank you, as always, for what you do in preserving our history. And thanks for being with us.
thanks.
Edna Fugit, archivist and reference librarian at the University of Pikeville, our guest on this edition of Where the 99 Leads. On behalf of the University of Pikeville, the leading university of Central Appalachia, I'm Andrew Joyce. Thanks for tuning in.